So in your groups, just whether you could talk about what creative methods you've used in the services that you work in or services that you've worked in previously. So just for about 5 minutes. Research or in practice, yeah. I'm sorry to stop you all in the middle of your creativity. You all seem to be doing really well.
So I'm going to research them.
I was wondering if now we could perhaps feedback. So if we start with the group over there, I just want to feedback a little bit about kind of some of the things that you've been doing in your services.
Right, we've got quite a list. Drama, photos, people bringing their own in and taking photos, role play, music, singing, dancing, sound tray work, one-to-one talking, research, banner making, testimonies, cooking hot meals for social gathering, and all sorts.
And where do you work at this table, roughly?
Nottinghamshire Refugee Forum. These have not all been happening there, but
Yeah.
a lot of them.
It sounds very exciting at that table. I want to work there. How about this table?
Well, I don't know, I think we started discussing it. What do we mean by being creative?
Yes, I mean, what I mentioned, I work for the Race Equality Centre. We have a integration project within the Race Equality Centre. Whenever we wanted to find more, information from the clients about, they wanted, and if we just wanted to see any gap in services, we would hold focus group meetings, because that group, when we have focus groups, they find it much better to communicate, and they're more open, and we collect information what they provide, and then that's how we try to provide future services. Example, we started with providing integration service, offering them housing and benefits and all those advice, but then realized once they're settled in the accommodation, they want to find work. So now we've got employment service to help them with that. And also then we discovered that clients also have experience of having their own businesses. So now we're opening a new service where we will assist people set up their own businesses. So that's how
kind of adapting to people's needs.
Yes.
Yeah. And what other things? Did you got to see lots of things on there?
Well, basically, I think what we were thinking about was how we're creative in research and practice, and we thought we'd divide it out, and we thought we'd use focus group interviews, use whatever method needed to identify gaps in services, use of interpreters within the context of research, surveys, client feedback, using stats. And in terms of practice, we didn't get a chance to talk about it as much, but we said we'd adapt practice, use individualistic approaches to meet the client's needs, use interpreters to access the community.
Yeah, that's how we do as well, access the community. So if we wanted to reach the Iraqi community or interpreter who speaks Iraqi, we would have contacts in the community, and that's how we reach them. So it depends on the community. So we have very good relationships with our interpreters who give us opportunity to access the classroom communities there.
How about the table at the back?
Right, we've got, the first one was what I put down, which is, we've got a giant snakes and ladders game. I work in mental health, and we use it to get people talking and to problem solve. So, but the whole group helps to solve the problem. So when you land on a snake, that's a problem, and you're told the problem, but the whole group help you to solve it. So, as I say, it's also a bit of fun. So, and I think the next one is a bit of fun as well. I think we seem to it's nice having a bit of fun there as well. That breaks down not barriers, great leveller. Nursery rhyme. This was sort of done, I think, obviously where there was a lot of children. this one was translated into Mandarin from English to allow the different children, the Mandarin children, to sing the same nursery rhyme and the others. So there was great fun in that as well, and the different styles of singing were then sort of appreciated and noticed. And then we've not done loads. The third one was world food, so getting lots of different dishes and having sort of like a tasting session sharing them.
So actually there's quite a lot of creativity that's already kind of been used in this room and in the services that you work in. So what I'm going to talk about now is I'm going to talk about kind of the research element and talk about that. So just bear with me 1 second. So working creatively in research, and I'm going to talk about different research methods. And then I'm also going to use examples from my research project, which was part of my thesis, which was called Here Alone, the role of coping and adaptation in unaccompanied minors. And a lot of people today have used unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, so both are used. I've used minors because that's what's used in the research, so it means that my research can be compared to others more easily. So kind of why work creatively? I think research, as this table has kind of already pointed out, is quite a creative process to begin with, to kind of find a research area and identify the need and think about how you would design that and answer that. Refugee and asylum-seeking populations, especially unaccompanied minors, are quite underrepresented in the literature, and research can be really valuable in terms of supporting clinical work and the development of services, providing evidence. We're in a culture where everyone's being asked to provide evidence for things, and it can be really useful to help with those things. So some of the creative methods, and these are all things that have already been said in your different services, so things like photographs, photo voice tend to use quite a lot of that at that table. You said you use photographs. Drawings are something that's been used in research quite a lot in South Africa, in populations there they've been using it. And sand play, I know you talked about sand tray, I don't know if that's similar, is it? Or do you know?
Sand trays where everyone has their own little sand tray, and
Yeah.
you can choose from tiny objects to make your own sculpture in the sand.
Yeah, that's the same as sand play. So where people make a sculpture using the sand and it kind of represents their internal world in some way. This was the idea. Creative writing, I think someone talked about stories and nursery rhymes and poems. Art therapy, something that's been used in research as well. Drama, someone talked about drama as well. And I wanted to talk about participatory action research as well, which is something that's beginning to be used more, and it's slightly more political, but I do think it's creative. It is kind of thinking about research in quite a different way, in a political way, and where the participants are kind of seen as researchers as well, so they might be involved with the design of the study, and that's kind of part of the process of participatory action research. So it has a lot to do with thinking about kind of power dynamics between the researcher and participants, which I think is really important, especially with refugee and asylum seekers, where they might have kind of experienced disempowerment in their lives now and in the past. So the kind of the value of creative methods in research. When English is a second language, creative methods can be really useful, especially the visual creative methods like photographs and drawings. They can be really useful as a medium to kind of talk about without relying on language so heavily. There's some evidence that allows participants to independently process and explore a concept. So there's some processing going on before you're doing your interviews, if that's what you're deciding to do. And with the power dynamics, kind of reduces the power dynamics between the researcher and the participant. So the participant has more control over what's happening. If they're creating, it's really in their hands. So with my research, kind of after doing my literature review and identifying a need that there wasn't much research, the role of coping and adaptation in unaccompanied minors. So my research questions were what coping skills are used by this population, how do they aid adaptation to life in this country, and how do unaccompanied minors describe that relationship between coping and adaptation. So what I decided to do is I worked with Alison at the Freedom Club at the Centre project, and I used Afghan unaccompanied minors, and I had quite a small sample size. I did a qualitative project, I did interviews, so it's sample size of 8. And the participants between 15 and 18, the young people, and they'd been here more than a year, so their level of English was quite good. And I got consent from the unaccompanied minors, but also from their legal guardians, which were foster carers. Social workers never replied. The method I used is I also volunteered at the Centre project. For me, I thought that was really important, being able to understand the wider issues that the young people were going through, and not to be so, I guess, single-minded about what I wanted to find out, but really kind of understand what was happening for them, which I thought would be helpful and was helpful in interpreting my results. And you kind of mentioned at this table the use of focus groups. So I had a focus group which was kind of myself and my research supervisor, and we had unaccompanied minors as well, kind of involved with the design of the study and finalising the procedure and the research design, and then consent. And we gave young people disposable cameras with a creative brief, so they took pictures of things that they thought helped them to cope. And then I used that as the basis of the interview. So the young people talked about what they'd taken pictures of, and it was really kind of just asking about that. And we had another focus group to meet and interpret the initial findings, so that kind of the unaccompanied minor's voice was present at different stages of the research, and I wasn't interpreting something that they didn't feel was true. And yeah, so that felt very important to me. The findings, we had 5 main themes with kind of smaller sub-themes. Positive relationships are really important to young people. That can really help you when life is quite uncertain. And the importance of success and doing well and what you needed to get there. And just kind of the practical needs that a lot of young people kind of weren't getting or found really useful when they did get it. And acculturation, so this idea of adapting to life in the UK and what they needed for that to happen, and how emotional that can be. That's a really important part of adaptation. We talk about it as something separate, but what a lot of the young people were saying, that that can be quite an emotional journey as well, and that was important to be recognised. And another theme that kind of kept being talked about again and again was just how important it was just to be a young person and not be seen as an asylum seeker or a refugee, and to be just treated as any other child, but to be able to have friends and have fun safely and in a safe place. So I found the findings really interesting. I think the creative aspect of the method really helped the study. I think it empowered participants, it gave them more control over what they wanted to talk about. They were involved at different stages of the study, and their photographs led the interview rather than me leading the interview. And it was a shared focal point for us to talk about, so there wasn't so much pressure. They knew what they were going to be asked about because they'd taken pictures of it. There wasn't any surprises. It let them think about coping before they even came to the interview. So the participants were able to discuss coping in depth, which I think made a real difference in comparison to other studies. Ethical issues and being creative tends to stop after the research method. They're not kind of usually discussed after that. So one of the things that I was thinking about was, who do these findings belong to? Do they belong to me? Do they belong to the young people who took part, or kind of academics with journal writing, which is something you're very strongly encouraged to do? Or is there kind of more society, like the public? Do they have a right to know about the research findings? So that was something that I felt was really important. Instead of it being locked away, I wanted people to know about the research, and it was a good way of getting the young people's voices heard. So the findings of this study were exhibited in a local museum alongside artwork from the club. And they had like a special little clicky system. So it was there for 2 months, and I think they said that 2,000 people saw the exhibition, which for me was great. And if even 10% of those people read it, that's 200 people more that know about refugee and asylum seeking issues. And so these are pictures from the exhibition. Just here we've had the results and the findings that we just discussed. They're also in the conference room if you want to go and have a look in more detail. We had information about the research and information about the club as well. Alongside that, I had different questions. So asking viewers and people that were coming what helped them to cope and where they felt the most safe. So this was when we set up, so we'd all put one each, so that's why there's only 3 there. And they ran out of the post-it notes after 2 weeks because so many people engaged with the research and with the questions, which I think is really good for kind of normalising things. A lot of the things that people wrote were the same as the themes that we found. So where did you feel the most safe? And that's how it looked when we went to take it down. It was full. They had to take some off to make room for more, which is really encouraging. It was also Young People Seeking Safety Week at that time, so at the club with the help of an artist, they'd made some artwork and made these banners and posters to promote children's rights. This is some of the artwork that young people did. They also wrote some poems, if you can see just here, which are also up in the conference room. So here's an example of one. I don't know if you can read it, so I'll just read it to you. This is by B. My name is B. I am from Darfur. I'm 16. I've never met you before. Sudan, Libya, Italy, France. I came to England to have a chance. I travelled across many different nations, but now that I am here, I can get an education. We are the boys of the Freedom Club. All we really want is peace and love. Anyone have any questions?
That was supposed to be a rap, you know.
It was supposed to be a rap. Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah. Next time. Yeah.
No, just smaller comments. But you said the number of the sample was 8 young people.
Yeah.
So was the focus of your research? You weren't necessarily trying to have something that could present to see young minor asylum seekers.
Sorry, say that again.
Were you trying to get a representative sample of the views of young unaccompanied asylum seekers? Or were you just trying to talk to you and see a qualitative angle what they felt before?
Yeah, well, with qualitative research, it tends to be quite small samples anyway, because of the level of analysis that goes into it. So they do tend to be quite small samples. But you're right, it is a limitation of the research, because with qualitative research, it's really difficult to get a whole kind of a big sample view of what's happening. So it is a snapshot, really. Yeah.
I mean, it was interesting, you just had Afghans.
Yeah.
Could you have done something like that with a mixed national group?
Yeah, well, at the Freedom Club at the time, it was mainly Afghan and accompanied minors. My other concern with kind of using different nationalities in, like you said, quite a small sample, is that it would really confuse the results. Whereas this way, I could have a small sample and a real kind of focus on the results without confusing, because there's a lot of things about what it culturally meant to people. And I think as a wider study, it would be really good to kind of do the same study with different nationalities. But in the same study with such a small sample, it would have really confused the results, I think. Yeah.
Because we have certain national groups who probably have difficulty in connecting with each other.
Yeah.
Because such diverse cultural backgrounds.
Yeah. Which is probably a different study.
Yeah.
Yeah, in itself. Yeah, it's really interesting.